I'm Shirley, and this is Finlandia Diaries. I don't think I've ever introduced myself before. I've made a couple videos already on my channel, and some of my friends said to me, why don't you do an intro video, because people might want to know who you are and why you are in Finland. So long story short, my husband is Finnish and we have 2 kids, and that's how I am able to stay in Finland. Now, if you want the longer version of the story, then keep on watching. So I guess we'll go all the way back to when I was born. I am an American, but I was actually born in China. I was raised on the west coast of the United States, and I moved to New York City when I was about 19. My husband and I met while we were both working in New York City, and after getting married, we decided to buy a house together because we just thought that that was the next logical thing to do after settling down. Because of our budget at the time, we had 2 options really. One was to buy like a 1-bedroom, at most a 2-bedroom apartment, or in New York City they're condos because you don't actually own the unit, so it's like a condo. So we were either able to get a small condo near New York City, not even in Manhattan, probably either in Queens or Brooklyn or even New Jersey, or our other option was to go a little bit outside of the city and find a house. So this was before the pandemic, thankfully, and there were a pretty good amount of houses for us to choose from, and so we went around and took a look at a few houses. We ultimately decided on a split level ranch, and I'll put a picture here for you guys to see what that looks like. It was about 2,500 square feet because the previous owners had done renovations above the garage, so there was a little bit more extra living space. And at the time, the interest rate was, I think, 4.25%. I think that's what our interest rate was when we signed a 30-year loan. At that time, we had no kids then. Even though we had talked about maybe having kids or thinking about having kids, neither of us were really ready for that, so we held off on having kids. And essentially, we were living the DINK life, the dual income, no kids life. My husband worked and I had a full-time job at a corporate company, and we were just living life. Fast forward a few years, we've decided that it was probably time for us to have kids because we were not getting any younger. I'm currently in my late 30s already, and my husband is in his 40s, and we thought that the window of us having kids was getting smaller and smaller, so we decided to have a baby. And so our firstborn, our son, was born during the pandemic. He was born in 2020. It was so awesome that we had our house at the right time because we were all locked in and we were working from home, and I had my baby there as well, so I was able to basically work until he was about 6 months, 7 months old at home while taking care of the baby. My husband and I would switch off, but when he turned about 7 months, it got to be a little bit too much because he started to crawl around and stuff like that. So we ended up getting a nanny, and she came to our place 5 days a week during work hours while I worked from home. And then during lunch breaks, I was able to see him and still spend some time with him. And fast forward 2.5 years, we decided to have another kid because growing up, I did not have a sibling since I was born in China. I was born during the era where you were only allowed to have 1 kid. So I had no siblings growing up, and I knew that if I ever had kids, I would want them to have a sibling. So we decided to have another baby, and our baby girl was born in 2023. And so by then, we were no longer living the DINK life because we had 2 small kids to raise, and both of us had to work because, well, we had a mortgage to pay. And due to nobody's fault but our own, we did not crunch the numbers. If you follow Ramit Sethi, you'll hear him say that buying a house might not be the best option, and you don't want to end up being house poor. And that's exactly what happened to us. We were house poor. We were house poor and kids poor, basically. New York State in America is one of the most expensive states to live in because you have to pay a lot of property taxes. I think our property taxes were upwards of $10,000 a year. And part of that was what they call school tax. You had to fund the local schools. Even though our kids were not even school age and they were not going to school, we still had to pay the taxes. After our daughter was born, I had 6 months of maternity leave, which was nice. With my son, I only had 3. In the US, you really don't get a lot of time for mat leave, and I was lucky to get 6 months off. Usually, companies would give you like 12 weeks or even sometimes less than that. So I was thankful to have 6 months. And I returned to work after 6 months. At that time, my son was in daycare, and our daughter was sent to the nanny that looked after my son, and she was with her during work hours. Even though my husband worked from home, he wasn't able to look after both of our kids while still having to do work. Because we lived away from the city, in order to get back into the city for work, I had a really, really long commute. We're talking about upwards of 2 hours driving one way because of traffic going in and out of Manhattan. So that was crazy. Even though we had to be in the office like 2 to 3 times a week, it was still a lot. Juggling 2 kids and having to commute. So by that time, I had probably been working in corporate for about 10 years and I was kind of tired of climbing the corporate ladder. I realized that companies really don't care much about you. All they care about is themselves. So we had a big house and 2 young kids and we both had to work and it was just a lot. There was a lot of tension in the house. We were tired all the time. We didn't have family around to help us. And so that kind of got us thinking. The numbers weren't adding up, even though both of us had a good salary because of all the taxes and healthcare that we have to pay for, daycare that we had to pay for, mortgage, whatnot. The numbers just didn't add up. Now, if we had budgeted a little bit better and thought about what our plan was going to be for the next 5-10 years when we bought a house, it probably would have changed things a little bit, hindsight 2020, but that we didn't do that. And so we just felt like things didn't really make sense. Because my husband is Finnish, our kids, once they're born, no matter where they're born, they have Finnish citizenship by birthright. So they automatically became Finnish citizens the moment they were born. And even before we had kids, my husband and I would often visit Finland. That also cut into our finances a little bit because we usually would come to Finland during the summer and during Christmas. So that's like 2 trips to Europe. And that was not cheap. So anyways, I feel like I've been rambling a lot. We did our numbers and things were just not adding up. Even though we were able to get by, we were practically living paycheck to paycheck. We were not happy with how much we had saved and we were not happy with our investments. And so we started talking about maybe moving to Finland for a little bit. And there were a lot of late night conversations about whether or not this is a good idea, the pros and cons, everything we have to do. And so ultimately, since I'm sitting here in Finland talking to you about this, we made it to Finland. My husband grew up in Turku, so his parents are still here. Most of his friends are here. We're currently living in Turku. And there were multiple other factors that also played into our decision to move to Finland. Once we decided that we were going to move to Finland, I put in my notice on my company and we put our house up for sale. So we were able to sell our house after about two or 3 weeks because the housing market was just so crazy at the time. Interest rates were going up and there weren't a lot of houses available for sale because most of the people that bought their houses earlier had a low interest rate and they didn't want to give that up because even if they had made money selling their house, they would have to go somewhere else to live and get a higher mortgage. So there weren't a lot of houses on the market, which worked in our favor because we got, I think it was 2 offers within the first week or 2 of putting our house up for sale. And so we closed on the house. Or do you say that when you sell your house? I don't know. We signed the papers. We decided to sell our house. We also had 2 cars, so we sold our cars as well. And we had multiple garage sales and yard sales in order to get rid of most of our stuff. I don't know what percentage of things we sold, but we sold a lot of stuff. We did hire a company to ship some of our belongings over to Finland. I think we shipped a total of maybe 36 boxes or something like that. We took 8 suitcases with us on our flight to Finland. We basically packed up our entire life and now we are in Finland. We moved to Finland in November of 2023, so we've been here for just over a year. Luckily, my husband's job can really take him anywhere. He used to work from home, so now he still works from home. Because we had visited Finland every year ever since we got married, I pretty much knew what to expect. And after a year of living here, I am just really grateful for the opportunity to be in Finland, and I'm very thankful for my husband's family for taking me in. So my parents divorced when I was young, and I moved to the US with my mom, and my dad stayed behind in China. They divorced a few years after we arrived in the States, and my dad eventually started a new family. I now have a half brother, which I've never met, and he's, I don't know, like 30 years younger than me. So he has his own family in China. I don't really keep in contact with him that much except for a few phone calls here and there. And my mom sadly passed away from cancer about 12 years ago, so I really don't have any parents, even though I technically have a dad. I'm like an expat of an expat because I left China for the US and then I left US for Finland. My husband had already started speaking to my son in only Finnish while we were still living in New York, so his Finnish is like pretty good, like pretty fluent. It might not be as good as some native speakers because he also speaks English, but he can get by fine. And I've recently started taking Finnish lessons. Even though most people here do speak English, especially in the larger cities, you integrate better when you learn the language. So I'm slowly learning Finnish. It's very difficult, and I might make a video about that soon. But yeah, now we are in Finland, the land of 1,000 lakes. So I hope that answers some of your questions, and I'm happy to share my story with you guys. The reason why I started this channel is because I just want to document our life here, because this might be short term, it might be long term. If you want to follow me for more Finlandia adventures, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you want to buy me a coffee, I will leave a link below where you can do just that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Moi moi!